Make sure to leave a like, turn on notifications, and subscribe for more history. The Viking era is one filled with exploration, culture, tragedies, and war. Norsemen or Nordic tribes sought to conquer the English Isles for fortune, farming, and a better life. But how did the Vikings carve up England for themselves? What was the end result? The gripping tale of how the fearsome Vikings conquered Britannia is a period in history that defined a nation's future and forever changed the English landscape and peoples. This is the Viking invasion of England. The story of how the Vikings invaded England begins in the year 600. Following the dissolution of the Roman Empire presence in England, there was a period of migration to the English Isles, most notably from the Germanic Saxons. The Saxons would migrate in droves to Britannia and settle primarily in the lands of England, mixing the cultures over the years and eventually creating a hybrid culture between Britons and Anglo-Saxons. This would result in the early kingdoms of England, which included Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, Essex, Sussex, Kent, and Wessex. The kingdoms would live in relative harmony and peace for a time, that is, until the arrival of the Northmen, or better known as Vikings. The first Viking attack on what is now England can be tied to a specific date, was the raid on Lindisfarne, off the northeast coast, in 793. The eyewitness account begins with whirlwinds and flashes of lightning, and fiery dragons, and ends with heathen men wretchedly destroying God's church on Lindisfarne, with plunder and slaughter. The Vikings would not stop there, though. They would continue to raid parts of the English coast, plundering and razing settlements, leaving death and destruction in their wake. The invasion of Britannia had now officially begun. By 875, the Vikings had carved out a surmountable threshold of land, overtaking the kingdoms of Northumbria, East Anglia, Essex, and regions in Mercia. At the same time, Wessex had also expanded its borders, encompassing the kingdoms of Cornwall, Sussex, and Kent. King Ethelred of Wessex had died by this point. His brother Alfred would fill these shoes, and would eventually be known as Alfred the Great, who dreamed of uniting England under one banner. King Alfred would face the Viking onslaught alone. He first paid them off to stay within their borders, of what was named Danelaw. This would see the Vikings being granted land rights and living among the Anglo-Saxons. Unfortunately, this didn't last. The Vikings made a bold move and attempted to invade the rest of Mercia and Wessex. They would be halted at the Battle of Edington, taking place in May 878, between the Anglo-Saxon forces led by Alfred and the Viking forces led by Guthrum the Old. Alfred was victorious, and Guthrum was baptized 3 weeks after the battle. Decades later, King Alfred would pass, and his son Edward the Elder would take control of Wessex, and his daughter Ethelfled would succeed the Mercian throne. Together they took back territory and continued to expand far into Viking lands, all the way up to the city of York. In the following years, Ethelfled would eventually become sick and succumb to her illness. This created a power vacuum in Mercia, between Ethelfled's daughter Elfwin and the nobles. Edward jumped on the opportunity to seize power in Mercia and annex the kingdom under his banner. King Edward would die in 924, leaving his son Ethelstan to take his place on the throne. Wessex would continue to push more north, completely eradicating the lands of Danelaw. By this point, the unification of England was now a reality. Ethelstan was not done, though. He began to look towards his neighbors in the north, the Kingdom of Strathclyde and the Kingdom of Alba or Scotland, both of which opposed English dominion over their kingdoms. He proceeded with an attempt to invade Scotland and push the borders of England. Because of this, a trilateral alliance was formed between Scotland, Strathclyde, and Dublin, who was under the rule of a Viking named Olaf Guthfrithson. The Vikings had invaded and made Ireland their home many years prior, and were sure that if Scotland would be invaded today, Ireland could be invaded tomorrow. The three armies faced off with the English at the Battle of Brunanburh. King Ethelstan was victorious in the end and defeated the alliance. Ethelstan's victory prevented the dissolution of England, but it failed to unite the island. Scotland and Strathclyde remained independent, described as a Pyrrhic victory for Ethelstan. The campaign against the Northern Alliance ended in a stalemate. His control of the north declined, and after he died, Olaf seized the opportunity to invade England soon after, and acceded to the Kingdom of Northumbria without resistance. Olaf was joined in England by his cousin Olaf Kvaran, and Olaf's brother Blacair was left to rule in Dublin while he was away. The English were weakened at this point. In the disarray within England, Olaf remained in control of the northern part of England for a few years. Eventually his reign would come to an end with his death in 941. Afterwards, the English would reorganize and use the opportunity to retake lost territory, including the annexation of the southern part of Strathclyde. But just when the English thought they would see the end of the Viking invasions, they were wrong. In 944, Eric Bloodaxe of Norway would invade the region of Northumbria once more and divide the lands of England. He sailed across the North Sea with a massive army to invade the Isles. He believed the Vikings had claims to the lands of Northumbria. He would have a short reign until the English once again had driven him out and killed him in battle. He died in 954. England would experience a few decades of peace afterwards. However, it still would not be the last Viking encounter for the kingdom. In 1015, Canute the Great set his gaze on the Kingdom of England, looking to set up his own reign in the Isles. His forces of almost 10,000 men, many of them mercenaries, Canute successfully conquered the country and dethroned King Ethelred the Unready. Canute would go on to rule England, Denmark, and Norway simultaneously, creating the North Sea Empire for a brief period. Canute was a Christian. Because of this, he did not force the English to obey Danish law. Instead, he recognized Anglo-Saxon law and customs. After his death, his sons had short, troubled reigns. This prompted the final Viking invasion by Harald Hardrada, who faced off with the English king, Harold Godwinson. England was able to repel Harold's Viking army. However, this would be a critical turning point in England's history. William of Normandy, or William the Conqueror, set his eyes on England at the same time as Viking leader Harold did. Even though William was a Norman, ironically enough, he was of Viking descent. His great-great-great-grandfather Rollo was a Viking who in 911 had invaded Normandy in northern France. William thought he had a legitimate claim to the English throne, and thus wanted to make that a reality. Some could argue that William's invasion of England was truly the last quote-unquote Viking invasion. But that is a story for another time.